So it's a big change. And by the way, guys, I'm not going to do 30 minutes. I talk really fast. Alyssa knows this stuff, so I'm going to be your time gainer right here. It's a very short keynote because I don't go slow. So does anybody know what this is? Besides the incredible super geek who's in here with me right now. Anybody? So anybody ever heard of a botnet? So what's a botnet, right? Anybody know what that is? That's something you're maybe getting a distributed denial of service attack. Somebody's hacking into you and driving that. Well, this researcher went and took the little, I think it's called Karna, I can't actually read it, but the Karna botnet. He hired a botnet to actually measure internet traffic around the world. So when you actually look at the flows of how companies that you guys are trying to serve from an antenna or physical basis of network, the content guys are thinking like this. They're not thinking about that singular little antenna or tower or building or DAS network within a market. That it literally doesn't move their radar. But when they start thinking about moving content, it's around the world because it's a 24-hour business. So this botnet is literally measuring millions of hacked computers, as terrifying as that is, and actually showing traffic flows around the world. So how do you design infrastructure to handle that that's going to move the needle of big content companies? Well, these guys are all used to doing interconnection and driving things from the cloud and other things. So where is it all going right now? Well, the traffic flows have driven more to the core. They've become more of a cloud-centric environment. Everybody had a data center that they owned. They gave up and stuck it on Microsoft and Amazon and Oracle and Google and Alibaba and every other Tom, Dick, and Harry kind of cloud that's popped up. It's a great business to be in. You can get funding for it immediately. You can build giant data centers and house all those servers, or you can outsource those to CyrusOne and other companies like I worked at before. So what's happened now is that has driven traffic through internet exchanges. So internet exchanges are big giant hubs and spokes, like airports of the internet, where traffic is driven. Almost every single internet exchange, particularly in North America, is owned by Equinix. So you got one party kind of controlling all the traffic flows and everything driving back to that. What's happened now on the mobile side is those interconnection hubs have also driven back to that, and that's driven all the traffic flows. So anybody know what this building is? Everybody knows this one. So I built this building back in 2000. We opened in 2001. This is with Terramark, and this is the Napa of the Americas. This one building handles about 90 to 95% of all traffic between North and South America. How scary is that, right? But when I built this thing, none of this stuff existed. It's a 750,000 square foot grounds up telecom building. It was bought by Verizon and then sold off to Equinix. So now you have one entity controlling all of Latin America's traffic between North and South America. That's great. They do a good job. They're good stewards of the internet, but this is one of those hubs and spokes where everything drives back. Now, does mobile care about this? There's a couple of mobile pops in here. I know who they are, and there's all kinds of government stuff in here and everything else you can imagine, but these things don't really move the needle in that world. This building is a building that I built when I was at CyrusOne. I just left there last April. This building was built in 6 months, if you can imagine that, and it's 60 megawatts. So 60 megawatts, 6 months for one cloud provider. Now, how many millions of companies and entities are hosted on that one cloud provider's infrastructure? Is any mobile stuff there? Probably not. Does it matter? Probably not to the mobile world. So the infrastructure of the internet has shifted in a way that's very different to the world today. Everybody knows what this stuff is, right? Now everybody can see I'm talking about something you're familiar with. These are all, talking like things like Nextel huts or RAN-type head ends that are being housed in metal boxes. This is actually my company, and then SRP doing things like this at base layer. So doing a containerized edge data center and driving that to the mobility edge. So why are we doing that, and what does that mean? What is that supposed to drive? Well, the idea is taking core physical infrastructure that internet infrastructure uses, so something that Facebook or Microsoft or Amazon would use, and pushing it all the way out to the edge in an environment that they're comfortable with. So the folks who need to accept this is really the mobility industry. Are they going to house their RANs, their head-ends in that, and are they going to actually make this the true edge, where you actually have an aggregation of, say, 100 towers handing off content and eyeball traffic locally? Or do you continue down the same path, driving it back to core internet exchanges, back to the cloud, and following the same layer cake approach? This is where CyrusOne, guys, my last company I left, where EdgeMicro is deploying. We're doing 30 cities to start out in North America, but every single one of those dots are actually locations we're going to, and we're putting in our units to actually deploy these. It's a daunting task. So when I was at Cyrus, we had just under 50 data centers. 50 data centers, millions of square feet, took huge teams, construction teams, everybody else to build that stuff, and they're concrete. They're on the ground. Once you build them, they're not moving. You have to deal with all that power infrastructure, and they fill up, and then crap, I got to find more land. I got to build more fiber in. Imagine doing 10,000. which is really what we have planned. 10,000 locations, and how do you drive that and deal with fire permits and construction permits and just everything. We can factory build our units, but that's the kind of infrastructure that's going to take place to actually drive content out to the edge. So this is the way traffic is taken care of today. It's all in a remote data center. It passes through from a RAN or Tower Hub back to a MITSO, back to some central office somewhere, lots of almost edge stuff, as I like to call it, all the way back to an internet exchange, maybe to a cloud site, to pick up that content and pull everything back. So it doesn't seem very logical and seems really expensive. And I think everybody kind of sees this coming, even at 4G LTE, but certainly at 5G when you have low latency requirements in markets and everything has to be served that way. So this is where we make the change, and there's a very simple way we do it. To be able to exchange traffic, and we call it ETX. I actually posed a question to our CTO before he was our CTO a couple of years ago. I was just on the advisory board. And I said to him, can't you just peer at the edge? Can't you just interconnect? It's Ethernet, right? Can't you just do that? He's like, oh, no, that's not possible. The standards don't exist. The mobile guys won't let it out of their S gateway. I'm like, why not? It was just stupid to me. Didn't have any logic. So he came back 2 days later and he said, this is before he was our CTO. He got hired right after this because of this idea. He said, I have an idea. We can actually break out the traffic at the S gateway, and nobody's done it before, and we can file a patent on it. And so we filed a patent on it, and now we actually have a software partner. It's just basically putting a module onto RSent or Athernet or any existing software that has EPC and S gateway software. It sits on existing hardware, but it actually allows a one to multi-peer environment. So an eyeball provider, like a mobile provider, like an AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, Verizon, whoever, can now control that at the S gateway and interconnect to content that sits locally in our boxes. Now that's a sea change. That actually now exposes the entire content world to eyeballs that they have locally, reduces latency, changes that whole backhaul scenario. So that's the primary goal. I got a little video. I don't know if this will play. Can you play the video? Or if I click on it, will it? All right, there you go.
First EdgeMicro production data center is now live. This is a demonstration unit out in front of Denver Nanog. You can see some of our clients and partners in place already. Akamai already has servers inside. Our different partners, Bitbox, Fiber Mountain, Megaport will be operating the IX inside. Our BART AC units, you can see one unit in place. The second one will go right here. As you'll see, I go up to the key card entry into the data center. Door unlocks, and we're down into the hot aisle. Inside, you can see our Bitbox DCIM system. This will operate all of the EdgeMicro data centers globally. We can manage all the infrastructure, and as we go from a 20-foot to a 40-foot unit, it scales up. Everything you see inside of here is the same thing you see in a large-scale data center, micro-encapsulated for an EdgeMicro unit to fit our size and scale, including gas suppression. You can see the conduits and entry points to be able to bring in fiber from the outside world. Our AC plenum, ladder racking for fiber and cables, and then you can see some of the racks in place. We are on the hot aisle side. I'm now going to move over to the cold aisle side and show you what that looks like. As we come in, again, key card entry, and our racks have the same key card entry into them. So you can actually go ahead and key card in and light into a rack. As you look over here, you can see Akamai servers, our very first servers in place. Power systems, we will operate the automatic transfer switch if we put in a generator. Very excited about our Fiber Mountain partnership. These little connectors that go inside here allow us to touch the screen with an NFC connector. It lights up the ports available for the different cross connects we need to do, so we have less fault and less issues with cross connects being done. Very, very proud of the very first EdgeMicro data center.
So it's always fun to show videos of yourself talking over something, but I thought it's easier than me trying to repeat it all. You can see what we've done there is taken everything you do off the shelf from building a data center. There is nothing unique in there. Each rack is 8 kW rack, so we can do 48 kW total. Kilowatts. Yeah, 48 kilowatts total. That was based on interviewing lots and lots of content companies and actually talking to some of the mobile guys on the RAN side of what they would need. It's funny because we only have 6 racks that can fit in there, but if we do a 40-foot unit, we can do 14 racks. But oh, thousands. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and you can stack them in. That's 60 megawatts, so you can imagine inside that one Cyrus 1 site, and really high ceilings because of convection and everything else. It's a whole different world. At a single site, it's not that exciting, but when you start talking about thousands of them all over the place, it's a big infrastructure play. It's the first time in my career we can actually have something where you can do a total land grab as long as you have the right relationships and the infrastructure and the methodologies in place. Our first investor and the seed capital was Schneider Electric, so they're a great manufacturer, provide Square D and all the other APC, everything is manufactured by them. Made it very easy for us, so we had a soup to nuts partner on that. We've raised millions of capital to deploy these and many millions more coming in. Our biggest issue is really space. So if you think about it from an infrastructure perspective, you would assume cell towers make sense, right? Everybody thinks that makes sense. It's a good place. There's mobility. There's fiber. They might have a contentious relationship with their own customers, but it makes sense. Now, if I go to somebody like an American Tower, that's 160+ thousand towers around the world. It kind of solves my real estate need until you actually go look and figure out what that real estate is. It's on top of a building. It's attached to a corner of a building. It's not necessarily a real tower sometimes. When you go look at the base sites, they're full. There's really no room for me to stick this in unless I get lucky enough that there's a little extra dirt, or they have a first right of refusal, or there's an old Nextel hut we can throw away, and because those make no sense. Modifying those makes no sense whatsoever, and then put this in place. So what's interesting for us is real estate becomes the biggest pain point, not the infrastructure, not fiber. Well, that's everywhere really. It's real estate. So we think about it in a different world. We think the towers are a great place to deploy in a market. And I'll give you an example here. Houston has, as I said before, about 10 million people. Spread out, very sprawled infrastructure, very tough to deploy in if you think about how you're going to reach eyeballs. So in our very first site that we're going to, it happens to be in Greenspoint. It's North Houston. It's right next to a bunch of data centers. There's a lot of fiber there. And we're actually going to a tower there. But I also have the opportunity to go to parking lots. So I can go to a CenturyLink central office and go to their parking lot. I can go to a Walmart parking lot, a Home Depot, a McDonald's, an Exxon. I don't really care as long as they're next to a fiber splice point, and I'm actually able to reach those RANs that might be sitting either at a CO or a different building or an office as long as I'm geolocated close enough. So in a perfect world in Houston, I would say 4 or 5 towers, maybe a couple of retail mall type or enterprise type environments, a couple of central offices, maybe a piece of dirt that we acquire directly, all geolocated around the market to create nice load balancing for our customers between all the different eyeballs they reach there. What's interesting, what the clients are talking about is actually video and ads serving very, very specific demographics. So West Houston might be the energy corridor, so Exxon and Shell and everybody else and their needs, might be very different. East Houston might be a Latino-speaking population that wants video and ads served that are all Latin content. How do you distribute that and have it extremely low latency? Video gaming, autonomous vehicle traffic, IoT, I said it again, I don't really care about IoT, but it's gonna feed into this anyway. The cloud guys actually having virtual EPCs sitting on top of their cloud stacks inside of our environments, so the eyeballs are actually housed within us. So it's kind of a neat way to look at how these things are gonna deploy. I like to show this because this is kind of cool, and I like to call it Interconnect Express and all this fun stuff. And one day I'll do a really fancy picture and really put our logo all over this with Photoshop, because if we can actually fill it up, it'd be cool. Anybody have any idea how many containers, 20-foot containers, I can fit on top of a ship like this? Just guess. Like anybody involved in shipping? 100? No, more than that. Way more. Way more. Almost 25,000. It doesn't seem logical in how that's possible, but that's how many you can fit inside of these things. It's nuts because it goes way deep into the ship. And these are 20-foot equivalent units, so TEU is what they call these. And that's actually what we're originally, these are 40s you're seeing here mostly, and some 20s up front. This is insane, but think about it from the perspective of global infrastructure and how you move the needle for edge, and where do you house all that stuff, the real edge, and where is that going to be? Well, to do that, you're going to have thousands and thousands distributed. My dream is to have this built in China or wherever else or locally. I don't really care because it's all off the shelf, at the lowest cost possible, distributed on ships, dropped off on ports with the same trucking infrastructure, delivering out to these edge sites and deploying it and actually changing a true paradigm shift in how the internet is distributed. So that's our goal of our company and making that happen. I think that's what you're going to see happening at the edge and where that stuff is going to be housed. And that's it, guys. Any more questions?
I may have missed it. What's the square footage of the?
One of those, it's about 10 by 20, roughly. We have air conditioners on the outside and things like that. Unfortunately, it makes a little bit of a wide load distributing it, but it's all factory built. So we probably, if we think about on the manufacturing side, we're probably going to have about 30 manufacturers at any one time pumping these out just to handle loads because they won't be able to keep up. And I do think we'll move away from a containerized unit, but you will have an ISO clamp system. The metal container is what we've used now just because they're readily available and cheap and structurally strong. But there are better ways to build it, and certainly going lighter for rooftop distribution in New York and things like that when we crane them up. That steel container is 17,000 pounds. It gets a little tough in that way. One more in the, you go first.
I hadn't asked this before to you, but just wondering how you are protecting yourself against elements in certain markets, like Houston.
Yeah, in this case, when we actually go and put these units, first of all, the units themselves are quite strong, and we actually can, in a market, for example, one of our big equity investors wants us to go all over Africa, where we'll become the infrastructure, not the edge. It's as much as we like, because everybody's on mobile and everything else. We will be the infrastructure. In that environment, we have to worry about these whole units getting stolen. Everything has to be bolted down. Everything changes because you're in third world countries. So in that environment, we're actually going to weld these to concrete pads where they have heavy steel and things going down into the ground, and they'll actually be armored, so they're bulletproof. Has anybody had their fiber shot before? Anybody ever dealt with that, right? So I live in Texas, and with Cyrus One, we were the biggest data center provider in Texas. We had a lot of fiber, and everybody who claims they don't have aerial, they've got aerial. And of course, in Texas, it's fun to shoot things with a shotgun and rifles, and so they shoot fiber all the time. So things like that are important. Now imagine in a third world country when you have something like this and somebody's got an AK-47 and that looks really good to shoot, right? So things like that we have to worry about. How do we handle that infrastructure and make it safe and repeatable and ubiquitous? So Najim is, I don't know if he's in here, but he's somewhere wandering around from Facebook. Something that makes Najim pay attention is how does he have something repeatable over thousands and thousands of locations? I want to put a half a rack in and I don't have to worry about it. But wait, now it's in Africa, I got to worry about it. Don't worry, it's bulletproof. So, we take care of those kind of things. Let me go him and then you, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, zoning and permitting.
That was my question.
That is, okay. It is, we're putting out our first proof of concept unit. We got factory units being produced right now. Yeah, zoning in Houston's a free-for-all. You can build a data center next to a church. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. We actually had about 15 generators with houses right behind it at one of our sites in Houston. And I feel bad for folks who built their house and thought it'd be fine, and then we pop up, right? But zoning has been interesting. So if I go to a cell tower, it's not really a change of use. It's a telecom structure. But what we found in our first POC unit that's just getting put in place in Denver and a bunch of guys going into it is that we ran into a wall with the fire department. So of all things, you wouldn't think we'd have any problems. There's nothing different. This is a little data center. They 8 weeks of review, special drawings, and now as a company, we're regrouping like, holy crap, how are we going to deal with this at 10,000 or 30 or 40,000 units going all over the world? So it got really interesting. So what we've done is backed ourselves up a little bit. We wanted to be very hands-on as we get our first ones out, but we've actually gone to the same contractors who are deploying towers and deploying small cell sites and DAS stuff and everything else. They got lots of people. We can pay them fees to go stress over that, and we can get ahead of the curve on the timing for permitting, and fire departments, and God knows what else is going to come along as we go along, but hopefully prep for that. So we're going to use the same infrastructure that all the same players in the world are using. It's really no different, to be honest with you. Real estate acquisition is our single biggest problem. So as I'm starting to think about thousands of locations and the right partners, fiber's easy, lots of partners for that. You got a partner with me? Zenfi, no problem. See, it's easy. So, and I would expect that it's going to be a good business for you because we'll have a lot of units in your marketplace. But real estate's really tough. And then everybody also thinking, ooh, I've got the best real estate. Let me charge you a premium. And I get to tell them, no, I'll go next door and not pay that much. So it's been a fun game. Any other questions, guys? All right. Yeah, we can actually put the AC units on top if we need to. It makes it a pain for maintenance. We do have an ATS in place. We're not putting a generator in for the server world. So if you're a content company and you're doing CDN type world or caching, it's meant to fail. So it's meant to go down. So we actually are not putting a generator in place because that's a cost. But in Africa, we're definitely putting generators, yeah. And then fuel becomes a problem. And how do we keep our fuel from getting stolen? How do we keep the generators from getting stolen? It becomes a big, giant security mess. So Africa is not day one. Day one is the US and Mexico and Canada. Europe, we have partners in Europe now, and that market is actually rapidly accelerating. There's a big need there. What's interesting in a lot of the European Union, we don't need permits because of the size. It actually fits right in that envelope where we don't have to worry about that stuff. But doesn't mean we won't run into walls. I would say Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, where we will become core infrastructure. That's going to be a couple of years out. And it depends on funding or the right partner coming along and saying, please hurry, and the amount of resources we have to distribute that. All right, guys, thank you very much.